I want to start today with a premise that feels a little dangerous.
Just a little?
Okay, maybe a lot.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that if you raised your hand in a packed university lecture hall and asked it, you might get some, very awkward stares.
Oh, for sure. You might even get laughed out of the room.
Right. But the documents we're looking at today, they insist that this is the most important question we can possibly ask.
It's a question that definitely shakes the foundations a bit.
It really does. The question is this: what if the last 150 years of physics education has been teaching a lie?
Mm.
And I don't mean a small error, a rounding mistake or a miscalculation. I mean a fundamental, baked-in contradiction at the very heart of how we describe the universe.
And just to clarify right out of the gate, because I can already feel the physicists in the audience, tensing up, gripping their steering wheels, we are not talking about a mathematical lie.
That is a very important distinction. We aren't saying the equations are wrong.
Not at all.
Your bridges aren't going to start falling down because of this deep dive. Your phone isn't going to stop working.
Exactly. The math works perfectly. It builds refrigerators, it powers cities, it predicts planetary orbits with just staggering precision. But the premise here, the whole reason we're doing this, is that while the math is sound, the language we use to explain it,
The words themselves.
the actual words taught in classrooms, printed in textbooks, repeated in pop science documentaries, that language is fundamentally broken. It's a linguistic lie.
We are looking at a fascinating and, frankly, very aggressive stack of documents today.
That's a good word for it. Aggressive.
It's a set of manifestos written by a guy named Zachary David Enfield. He goes by Zach. And here's the real kicker. Zach doesn't have a PhD. He calls himself an undereducated outsider.
Which is usually a massive red flag in our line of work.
A huge one.
Usually when someone without credentials says, thermodynamics is wrong or I found a flaw in Einstein, you just toss it in the bin.
Right, because they almost never understand the basics.
Exactly. But this is different. Zach isn't attacking the science. He's not attacking the math. He's attacking the coherence of how the science is taught. He's attacking the story we tell ourselves about the math.
He argues that the way we speak about the second law of thermodynamics, specifically entropy, directly contradicts the first law. It's a logical impossibility.
And because of that linguistic trap, that failure of our own language, we've talked ourselves into believing in a dying universe and an irreversible timeline.
And he doesn't stop there, which is what makes this so compelling. He takes that argument, then he applies it to time travel, and then pivots into this incredibly profound philosophical argument about trust and political authority and even the nature of belief itself.
It is a wild ride.
It really is. We have two main documents here we're pulling from. One is called PhD versus Zach, which is his takedown of thermodynamic language, and the other is the temporal threshold, which is his technical argument for why time reversal is real.
And the core conflict here, when you boil it all down, it's really between what he calls academic authority, your degrees, your titles, your tenure, and simple coherence.
Logical consistency.
Right. Zach's argument is essentially, if your degree requires you to repeat a contradiction, then your degree is empty.
Ouch. That is a heavy swing.
It is. But by the end of this deep dive, I think you'll see why he takes that swing. We're going to rethink what the word waste actually means. We're going to seriously question whether time travel is actually impossible. And we're going to look at the concept of trust in a completely new light.
So let's get into it. Let's unpack this. Let's start with section 1 of his argument, the linguistic failure of thermodynamics.
Okay, so to really get why he's so passionate about this, you have to go back to high school physics, or just think about how we talk about the universe in general. How is the second law of thermodynamics usually explained?
Oh, it's the law of entropy. It's always described with words like disorder. Just things fall apart. Your hot coffee gets cold. Buildings crumble over time. Energy is lost. Systems just run down. It's all very grim.
It is. It feels like the scientific version of Murphy's Law, Whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and it's all heading toward decay.
Exactly. Loss, waste, decay, death. These are the metaphors we're given. We are taught that entropy is the measure of the universe dying a slow, inevitable death.
Right. But now let's put that on hold for a second and look at the first law of thermodynamics. What does that one say?
The first law is conservation. Simple. Energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Right. It is constant. It can change form, from chemical to kinetic to thermal, but the total amount is eternal. It's always there.
It never goes away.
And this is where Zach points out the massive, glaring contradiction that we all just sort of gloss over in school.
I feel like I'm seeing it for the first time.
It's crazy, right? The first law says energy is conserved. It never, ever goes away. But the second law, as it's typically taught using plain English words, implies that energy becomes unusable, wasted, or lost.
Okay, I see where you're going. How can you possibly have a universe governed by strict conservation that is also, at the same time, running out of the very thing it can serve?
Precisely. It is a logical incoherence. You cannot hold both of those ideas in your head literally without a conflict. If energy is conserved, it can't be lost. If it's lost, it wasn't conserved.
So one of the stories has to be wrong.
One of the stories has to be wrong, and Zach argues that this isn't a failure of the student to understand the physics. It's a failure of the explanation that's provided by the experts. The story is broken.
But wait, if the math works, and we agree the math is solid, what is the math actually describing if it isn't loss? What's really happening when my coffee gets cold?
The math describes redistribution. That's the word he keeps coming back to.
The redistribution.
It describes a statistical tendency. Energy spreads out. It moves from areas of high concentration, like your hot coffee, to areas of low concentration, like the cool air in the room. But spreading out is not the same thing as dying. I love the way he puts this in the manifesto. He says, entropy is not a measure of annihilation. It is a measure of configuration.
Yes. The arrangement of the energy has changed. That's it. And this brings us to what he calls the static observer fallacy.
Okay.
This was a real aha moment for me reading the source material. We look at energy that has spread out, say, heat dissipating from a car engine into the air, and we label it waste.
Right. We say, that energy is gone. It's useless now.
But Zach argues that waste is a relative term. It's only waste relative to a specific machine or a specific technology that isn't designed to catch it.
He uses this brilliant analogy of the solar panel. I think this really nails it for anyone who isn't a physicist.
It's so simple but so effective. Imagine you have a super high-tech solar panel. It's capable of generating massive amounts of electricity. But you point it away from the sun.
You pointed at the muddy ground.
You point it at the mud. Obviously, you get zero power. Now, here is the question. Do you say the sunlight is broken? Do you say the sun has lost its energy? No, of course not. That would be insane. You'd say the panel is pointed the wrong way. The limitation is in the receiver, in my setup, not the source.
Exactly. The energy is there. It's hitting the back of the panel or the mud, but the constraint, the collection mechanism, isn't set up to use it.
It's a failure of the collector.
It's a failure of the collector. And Zach argues that in thermodynamics, when energy spreads out and becomes diffuse, we do the exact opposite. We blame the energy. We call it high entropy and we treat it like garbage. But diffuse energy isn't dead. It's just hidden behind a scale we aren't currently set up to use.
So waste isn't a property of the energy. It's a statement about our own technological incompetence.
For a technological limitation at a given time. And he gives a really cool example of this using CERN, the Large Hadron Collider.
Right, this is supposed to be the empirical proof that diffuse energy isn't really dead.
It is. Think about what they actually do at CERN. They take particles, which are essentially just packets of energy, and they accelerate them. But before they smash them, that energy is just, floating around. Then they apply a new constraint.
The magnetic fields.
These massive, powerful magnetic fields that squeeze that energy into a tiny, tiny point. They smash them together, and what happens?
You get mass. You get structure. You get all these exotic particles popping into existence. You get symmetry.
You get the most highly ordered, structured things in the universe popping out of what seemed like nothing. Symmetry breaks, particles form. This demonstrates that the potential for order was never lost in the entropy. It was just waiting for a new constraint, a new boundary condition, to make it visible again.
Wow. So entropy isn't a one-way trip to the graveyard. It's just reshuffling the deck.
It's reconfiguration. That's the word. The cards are spread out all over the table, which looks messy, right? High entropy. But if you gather them up, apply a constraint, you can deal a new hand.
The cards didn't vanish.
They never vanish. And that leads us directly to the biggest, scariest story in all of science, the heat death of the universe.
Oh, man. This is the one. This is the idea that keeps you up at night if you think about it too much.
It's cosmic horror.
Yeah, the idea that eventually everything will spread out so much that the universe just becomes a cold, dark, silent soup. No stars, No life,
Yeah.
just nothingness.
Yeah.
Maximum entropy.
It's the ultimate version of the entropy is death narrative. It's the scientific apocalypse story. But Zach just tears this apart. He calls heat death a limit case under frozen assumptions.
Frozen assumptions. What does he mean by that?
Basically, the theory of heat death assumes that the universe will stop doing what it has always done, which is reconfiguring itself.
It just stops.
It assumes the rules of the game are static forever. It assumes no new gravity, no new compression, no new phase transitions will ever happen on a cosmic scale.
So it assumes the universe is like a wind-up toy that just runs down,
Yeah.
rather than a living system that constantly evolves and finds new ways to organize.
Exactly. And he uses a phrase here I underlined 3 times in the text. Unresolved potential.
I like that.
Instead of viewing maximum entropy as a silent grave, he argues we should see it as unresolved potential under static rules. If you change the rules, if you change the constraints, change the scale, that potential wakes up.
There's a really deep point he makes here about causal coherence. This gets a little abstract, but it seems really important for his argument.
It's fundamental to it.
He says that if a part of the universe actually lost the ability to interact, if it truly became waste in the absolute sense, it would effectively leave the universe.
This is a profound ontological point. I mean, think about it. If energy truly became useless or dead in an absolute sense, it would stop participating in gravity. It would stop participating in causality.
It would be like a ghost.
A perfect analogy. Physically present, but causally absent. But that doesn't happen. Even waste heat has mass energy equivalence. It has gravity. It warps space-time. It's still in the game.
So because it still interacts, it's still part of the whole system.
Exactly. It hasn't left. It hasn't died. It's just in a state we aren't currently using. So the big takeaway here is the universe isn't running down. It is reconfiguring. The second law describes how energy moves. It tends to spread out, not that it dies.
This brings us to the most confrontational part of the source material. Section 3, the critique of credentials. Zach calls this document PhD versus Zach. He is essentially calling out the entire academic establishment.
So he is picking a fight, absolutely. And his core stance is captured in this one line. If this burns your degree, it is not because I attacked it, but because it never rested on understanding to begin with.
That is fighting words. But his argument goes right back to this linguistic contradiction we've been talking about.
It all connects.
He says that if you are a PhD student and you pass your comprehensive exams by repeating the lie by saying energy is conserved on page 1 of your thesis and then energy is lost due to entropy on page 2, then you aren't being trained in truth.
You're being trained in obedience.
Obedience to tradition.
Yeah, that's it. He argues that experts, the PhDs, they're conditioned to mentally translate the bad language. A physicist hears the word waste in a lecture, and their brain instantly and automatically translates it to energy that has been dispersed into degrees of freedom that are currently inaccessible to our measurement or technology.
So they know the truth, but they use the lie because it's convenient shorthand.
It's like a secret handshake. They all know waste doesn't actually mean waste, but they teach it to the rest of us as if it does.
And Zach's claim is that his lack of a PhD is actually an advantage here.
Because he's not in on the joke.
Exactly. He hasn't been conditioned. He hasn't been trained to ignore the blatant contradiction. He's reading the words literally like a lawyer or a logician would, and when the words don't match the math, he points it out and says, this is broken.
It's the ultimate emperor has no clothes moment. He's the kid in the crowd pointing and saying, hey, you said conservation, but you also said loss. Which one is it? And that's why he says a credential that certifies misinformation is void. Legitimacy for him comes from understanding, not from the piece of paper on your wall. If you can't explain the law without contradicting yourself, you don't actually understand the law. You just memorize the ritual.
So, we've established that entropy might be profoundly misunderstood. We've established that the universe might not be dying after all. But then he takes this massive pivot.
This is where it gets really fun.
He says, okay, if entropy is just redistribution, if it's just reconfiguration, what does that mean for time?
And this is where we move to the second document, the temporal threshold. And the connection is incredibly tight. In physics, entropy is the arrow of time.
It's the reason time seems to move in one direction.
It's the only reason, according to physics. The only reason we perceive time flowing forward, why we remember the past but not the future, is because entropy, on the whole, increases. Your cup shatters, it doesn't unshatter.
So, if entropy is an absolute, irreversible slide into death, then time must also be an absolute one-way street toward that death.
Correct. That's the standard model. But, and this is the big but, if entropy is just relative to constraints, if entropy is just a shuffling of cards that can, in principle, be gathered up and reshuffled.
And the arrow of time isn't an iron bar.
It's not. It's a variable. It's a setting on the machine.
And this is where he drops the hammer.
Yeah.
The thesis of the second document. Time travel is not impossible. It is merely an engineering challenge.
It's such a bold claim. And he distinguishes between not yet and never. Science, popular science anyway, usually says time reversal is impossible. That is a very, very strong word.
It's an absolute.
It's an absolute. And Zach argues that's a metaphysical claim. It's a religious claim, almost, not a scientific one. The correct scientific stance, if you actually look at the data, should be time reversal exists locally and has not yet been scaled.
He sets this whole section up like a courtroom drama, which I loved.
Yeah.
He says he's going to put the claim time travel is impossible on trial.
And he presents exhibits to prove to a jury, to us, that time reversal is already real. The concept is already proven.
Okay, let's walk through the evidence because it is pretty compelling. Exhibit A, temporal metamaterials.
This is based on real research from the CUNY Advanced Science Research Center. This is not science fiction. This is a lab in New York City doing this right now.
So what exactly did they do there? It sounds complicated.
It is, but the concept is amazing. Imagine a wave of light, or any electromagnetic wave, moving through a special material. It's moving forward in time and space, just like normal.
Okay.
Suddenly, they change the properties of that material instantly. We're talking femtoseconds, an unbelievably short amount of time. They change it across the whole medium at once.
It's like flipping a switch on the fabric of that little piece of reality.
That's a great way to put it. They shake the container instantly, and the result, part of the wave reflects. But it doesn't reflect back in space like when a mirror reflects your face.
It reflects in time.
It reflects in time.
Whoa. Okay, what did that even mean physically?
Yeah.
A time reflection.
It means the tail of the wave becomes the head. The part of the wave that entered the material last comes out first. The wave starts evolving backward.
So if the wave was like playing a song, the song would play in reverse.
Exactly. If it was a video, the video would rewind. It is a physical, undeniable instance of backward temporal evolution.
So just to be clear, it's not a simulation. It's not a computer model of a wave going backwards.
No.
It's the actual physical wave rewinding its own history.
It is physically rewinding. It is retracing its own steps because the local arrow of time for that wave was reversed by the temporal interface.
Okay, that's Exhibit A. That's
Yeah.
already pretty heavy.
Right.
But Exhibits B and C are about things we see in hospitals every single day. He talks about MRI machines.
This one blew my mind. He argues that MRI technology is everyday proof of time reversal. We just don't call it that because, it would freak patients out.
Right.
Specifically, he talks about a technique called the spin echo.
How does an MRI use time reversal?
Mm.
I just like to use big magnets to take pictures of your insides.
It does, but the way it gets that picture is the key. So inside your body, you have trillions of hydrogen atoms. They have a quantum property called spin. You can think of them like tiny, tiny compass needles.
Okay.
When you go into the powerful magnet, they start out aligned. But then, left on their own, they dephase.
E-phase, what's that?
They spread out, they get messy, some precess faster, some slower, they become disordered. That's entropy increasing. That's the arrow of time moving forward for that system of spins.
Right, disorder increases naturally. That's the second law in action.
But then, the MRI machine hits them with a very specific radio frequency pulse. It's a precisely timed pulse designed to flip the system. And what happens? The spins strictly rewind.
They don't just stop.
They don't just
Okay.
stop. They reverse their trajectory. They regather. They go from disordered back to ordered. They literally reverse their evolution back to the starting point.
And that's the echo.
That moment when they all come back together, that perfect, beautiful reordering, is the echo. That's the signal the machine detects to build the image. We are using a local reversal of entropy to create the picture.
So every single time someone gets an MRI scan, they are, in a very real sense, witnessing a local reversal of the arrow of time.
On a quantum level, yes, we are reversing the thermodynamic evolution of those spins. We use this technology to save lives every day. We just don't call it time travel because it's tiny and it's just spinning electrons.
But his point is...
His point is, the mechanism exists. We are already treating the arrow of time as a manipulable variable in our technology.
I can already hear the skeptics. They're saying, okay, sure, you can reverse a wave in a lab, you can reverse an electron spin, but you can't reverse a person. You can't send a toaster back in time.
And that objection leads directly to his not yet versus never argument. Zach compares this to the history of flight. Before the Wright brothers, heavier-than-air flight was considered impossible by many leading experts. Lord Kelvin, one of the greatest physicists of his time, famously said it was impossible.
Because birds existed, but they didn't think a machine could do it. It was like a law of nature.
Right. But once you have a glider that lifts off for just 3 seconds, even if it crashes, even if its tiny flight is no longer impossible, it is now an engineering problem of scaling. You have proven the principle.
And Zach's argument is that the MRI and the temporal metamaterial, they're the glider.
They are the glider. We have proven the principle of reversing the arrow of time. Now it's just a matter of energy and complexity and scale. It's an engineering problem.
And then comes Exhibit D, the big guns, general relativity.
Einstein himself.
Yeah.
Zach points out, and he's not wrong, that general relativity, our best map of how gravity and the universe works, the theory that runs our GPS satellites, actually allows for time travel.
How so?
There are valid solutions to Einstein's equations, things like closed time-like curves, that mathematically allow you to travel back to your own past.
But I thought Stephen Hawking proved that was impossible.
Yeah.
I remember something about a chronology protection idea.
Hawking proposed a chronology protection conjecture, and the key word there is conjecture.
Which means a guess.
It means a very smart guess. A hope, really. Hawking hoped there was some undiscovered law of physics that prevented time travel because it made the universe simpler and, it avoided all those messy paradoxes.
Your grandfather paradox, all that.
Exactly. But Zach argues that the burden of proof is on the skeptics. The math of our best theory permits it. If you want to say it's impossible, you have to find a law that forbids it. And right now, no such law exists.
So to recap the courtroom argument, we have local reversal happening in the lab with metamaterials. We have industrial scale reversal happening in hospitals with MRI. We have mathematical permission from Einstein himself. So saying time travel is impossible is just a false statement.
It's scientifically false. It's a comforting lie we tell ourselves to keep reality feeling stable and simple. The honest statement, based on the evidence, is we haven't built a machine big enough or complex enough to send a human back yet. But the door is open.
And speaking of the open door, this is where the deep dive takes a sudden, sharp, and very unexpected turn. We leave the physics lab and we walk straight into the realm of philosophy.
It really does, and I think this is where the linguistic trap of thermodynamics becomes what he sees as a life trap. Because if we are lying to ourselves about the fundamental nature of physics, where else are we lying?
Zach introduces this thought experiment about trust. He talks about 3 postures you can take when you're standing in front of an open door, which could be a claim, a truth, or a belief.
Right. Imagine a claim is just sitting there in the public square. It could be God exists, or time travel is real, or the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. He says you have 3 ways to stand in relation to that claim.
Okay, so posture 1, the believer. You say, I trust this. This is true. You step through the door.
And in doing so, you own the risk of being wrong. If you believe and you're wrong, you might look foolish. You might lose something. You are taking a stand openly.
Then there's posture 2, the disbeliever. You say, I reject this. This is false. And you firmly shut the door.
And you also own the risk. If you reject it and it turns out to be true, you miss out on something important. But again, you are taking a stand. It's legible. It's honest.
But then there's posture 3, the lukewarm.
Laodicea, from the biblical reference. This is the one Zach attacks with real venom.
He really does.
It's the posture of the person who stands in the doorway, refusing to go in, but also refusing to leave, keeping the door propped open not out of genuine humility, but to avoid accountability.
This is the person who says, I'm just asking questions, or I'm an agnostic, I'm undecided. Well, it's complicated.
And Zach argues that when you are an adult, when you have the capacity to understand the terms of the question, undecided stops being an innocent position. It becomes deferral. You are trying to borrow the benefits of the system without owning the origin or the foundation of that system.
He connects this directly to the Declaration of Independence, which at first I found to be a strange left turn, but it actually fits his logic of sources perfectly.
It's a brilliant connection, whether you agree with it or not. The U.S. Declaration grounds our rights in a creator. It says we are endowed by our creator with certain unalienable rights.
We usually just gloss over that word unalienable. Does that just mean like really, really important?
No, it has a very specific legal and philosophical meaning. An alienable right is something that can be transferred or taken away. Think of a lien on a house. If the government gives you a driver's license, That is alienable. They can take it back.
Okay.
But an unalienable right cannot be separated from you, ever.
Why not?
Because the state didn't give it to you in the first place. That's the entire logic of the document. The rights come from a source that is higher than the state a creator, or nature's God, as they put it. Therefore, the state has no authority to remove them.
So the rights are only secure because of their source.
Exactly. But here is Zach's trap for the lukewarm citizen. Imagine a person who says, look, I don't believe in a creator. I think that's a fairy tale. But I really like my unalienable rights. I want my freedom of speech. I want my protection from tyranny.
Ah, you're borrowing the stability of the house without owning the foundation it's built on.
You are effectively saying, I want the protection of a God-given right, but I don't want to admit the God part. You are borrowing the philosophical capital without paying the intellectual interest. He calls this the critique of exemption.
It's like living in a house but refusing to acknowledge that the foundation even exists. You claim the roof protects you from the rain, but you deny the concrete it all sits on. Eventually, the floor is going to crack.
And this connects all the way back to the physics. In thermodynamics, we borrowed the math because it works, but we refused to use the coherent language because it was uncomfortable and challenged our grim narrative.
In time, we borrow the impossible label to avoid the hard engineering challenge.
And in civic life, according to his argument, we borrow the rights but refuse to take a stance on their source, which makes them vulnerable.
It's all about integrity, coherence. The pieces have to fit.
That's the word, coherence. You can't just pick and choose the parts of reality you find convenient.
He makes a sharp distinction between innocence and deferral. A child is innocent because they can't choose. They don't have the information or capacity. They don't know any better. But an adult who understands the stakes and still refuses to choose, that's not innocence.
That is insulation. You are trying to keep yourself safe from being wrong. And Zach argues, whether it's in physics or in philosophy or in life, that kind of safety is the enemy of truth. The believer risks being wrong. The disbeliever risks being wrong. The lukewarm person risks nothing and therefore is trustworthy to no one.
That is a harsh truth. If you never take a stand on anything, no one can ever truly trust you because they don't know where you really are.
Exactly. You're a variable that hasn't been defined. You're a ghost in the system.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've covered a lot of ground, from particle accelerators to the founding fathers.
We have. Let's look at the three strands together. They really all tell the same story.
Okay, strand one, thermodynamics.
We stopped saying energy dies and started saying it redistributes. We realized that waste is just a lack of imagination or a lack of the right technology, the right constraints. We stopped accepting the linguistic lie of a dying universe.
Strand two, time.
We stopped saying time reversal is impossible and started saying it's not yet scaled. We looked at the actual evidence, the metamaterials, the MRI, relativity, and realized the door to the past isn't locked. It's just very, very heavy.
It's an engineering problem, not a divine mandate.
Precisely.
And strand three, philosophy.
We stopped using uncertainty as a shield or an excuse. We realized that to be trustworthy, to be a functioning citizen, to be an honest scientist, you have to take a stance. You have to own your position. You can't just stand in the doorway forever and pretend that's a noble act.
It really is a call to action. It's not just, hey, here's a cool, interesting fact about physics. It's, hey, wake up. Look at the words you're using. Look at the contradictions you're accepting in your own life.
It's a demand for an integrated life. If your physics contradicts your math, you have to fix it. If your politics contradicts your metaphysics, his argument is you have to fix it. If your credentials rely on repeating a lie, you have to be willing to burn them.
If this burns your degree, it is not because I attacked it, but because it never rested on understanding to begin with. That line is going to stick with me for a long time.
It's the ultimate mic drop. It puts all the responsibility right back on us, the reader, the listener.
And he ends with that powerful image of the open door.
He says the door to temporal engineering has been standing open since the very first spin echo experiment was successfully performed. We just looked at the threshold, saw it was complicated and difficult, and we mistook it for a wall.
We thought it was a do not enter sign, but it was really just a construction ahead sign.
That captures it perfectly, and that applies to everything we've talked about. The limits we think are absolute. Heat death, the arrow of time, even our own indecision, he argues, they are often just failures of language. They are stories we tell ourselves to avoid the hard work of reconfiguration.
So here is the final provocation for you listening right now.
Yeah.
We've talked about entropy and time and trust, but take this out of the podcast and into your actual life.
Where else? Where else are you accepting a contradiction just because an authority figure, a teacher, a boss, a tradition, told you it was true?
Is it at work? Is it in how you view your own potential? Are you telling yourself that you're out of time or that you have wasted potential when really you just need to apply a new constraint, a new perspective?
And are you willing to fix the language, even if it means burning a credential you've held onto, even if it means stepping through the door and taking the risk of being wrong?
That's the question. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you on the other side of the threshold.